His mother was a teacher, and she was a teacher of remedial reading at the Brooklyn House of Detention. After graduation, Tom began his professional career with Morgan Stanley and later worked at Goldman Sachs. In '86, he founded Farallon Capital, a hedge fund firm headquartered in San Francisco. In 2012, Tom stepped down from his position at Farallon in order to focus on advocating for alternative energy. He and his wife, Kat Taylor, founded Beneficial Bank for the purpose of providing commercial banking services to the underserved Bay Area businesses, nonprofits, and individuals. All profits are reinvested in local communities. In 2010, Tom and his wife, Kat, signed onto the Giving Pledge, an initiative of Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. The pledge urges individuals and families to give half of their wealth to charitable causes during their lifetime. Tom's been an active Democrat his entire life. He worked on Walter Mondale's campaign. He raised money for Bill Bradley, for John Kerry. At the Democratic Convention in 2012, he gave a speech. He stresses the need for us to become energy independent, and he is the founder of Next Generation Climate and Environmental Advocacy Nonprofit Political Action Committee. Finally, he is married to Catherine Ann Taylor. They have 4 children, and they live in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's my pleasure to give to you Tom Steyer.
That is a pretty fulsome introduction. Let me make a couple comments. First of all, when I was in college, I worked as a ranch hand, and I used to have to buck hay. I got paid $100 a month for working from 8 to 5, 6 days a week, milk 2 cows before breakfast and 2 cows after dinner. I worked it out. It was less than 50 cents an hour. And I promise you, bucking hay for all through haying season for less than 50 cents an hour was rough. On the other hand, I have not seen real hay bales in a long time because I haven't seen people use them. We have a ranch. So my wife and I raise grass-finished cattle, chickens, and pigs, and we own about 30 horses. Whoa. So in fact, we get a chance to we can see how beautiful this barn is, we can see how beautiful this countryside is, and we can understand exactly what it means to raise animals, to raise livestock, and to live in rural America. Something that we see as a huge important thing. Before I get going, I want to say we just put out our plan in terms of rural America, which we call Partnering with Rural Communities, which includes a lot of things, but one of the things it includes is a partnership with rural communities and specifically farmers in terms of dealing together with climate.
Yes.
We're going to need to be partnering with people in rural communities and farmers to make sure that we're sequestering carbon, and we're going to need to get leadership and guidance on how exactly to do that from people in rural communities, and it will be a real partnership, and in fact we're going to be looking for guidance, and we're going to be then trying to put in incentives to make sure that it's not just a smart idea, but it's a profitable idea for people in rural communities. So I just want to make sure. So, I'm running for president for a very simple reason. I think the government's broken. I think corporations have bought it. I think it's working perfectly for corporations and not working at all for the American people. And so I listened to those debates. I think I'm the last person to get into this race. If I were smarter, I would have gotten in a lot earlier. But I didn't think I'd have to. I listened to those debates, and I heard basically a lot of discussions about policies. And it was, which is the right healthcare policy, which is the right Green New Deal, which is the right education policy. And all of those I really care about. And I'm going to try and get done quickly and answer every question you guys can ask. But let me say this. I couldn't listen anymore because we're not getting any of those policies. We're not getting the Green New Deal until we break the stranglehold that oil and gas companies have on our government. We're not going to get affordable health care as a right for every American until we get rid of the drug companies and the insurance companies and the monopoly hospitals who really run healthcare in the United States of America and write the policies. And on and on and on. And so I'm running basically to try and restore what we all thought we had, which was government of, by, and for the people. And so, like I said, I started a business from scratch. One room, no employees, no windows in the room. I built a pretty big international business, and then I walked away from it. And I walked away from it because I thought, I don't want to live this life. I want to have a more meaningful life, and there's something really wrong in the United States. And if you listen to what my parents were about, they're Depression-era World War II babies. And they thought, my dad was the first generation my mom was from Minnesota. My uncle was a professor at the University of Iowa for 50 years. My mom and my dad, my father was the first generation in his family to go to college. They thought the United States was the greatest thing in the world. That's why he stopped being a lawyer and went into the Navy in World War II. They thought you give back at least as much as you get from this country to this country. Because that's the way it works, and everybody has a responsibility. And I felt like, I don't want to do this anymore. I feel like there's something wrong in the United States. I want to be part of the solution. I don't have to be the whole solution. I want to be one of the people working for a better country because we're not doing the right stuff. So if you look at what I've done for 10 years, I've really tried to organize people like the people in this room to take on unchecked corporate power. And we've been beating them for 10 years. It's not true in Iowa, but in 26 states, you can put laws on the books, and if enough people vote for them on the ballot, if enough people vote for it, it's law. And so as a result, you can take these corporations on directly. And so I've taken on the oil companies, and everyone said, you will never beat them. You will never beat them. They're too rich, they're too smart, they're too ruthless. We got 70% of the vote. I took on the tobacco companies. They'd won 17 times in a row. We beat them. We raised $3 to $4 billion from them per year. We gave it to Medi-Cal, which is healthcare for the poorest people in California. There was a corporate tax loophole that was there by mistake. The legislature wouldn't close it. It's just a loophole. Wouldn't close it. We closed it and gave the money to the public schools on the ballot. I've fought for clean energy. I've taken on the drug companies. It's really been, people are intimidated by these companies, but they're not that smart. And they don't have truth on their side. And those are two pretty big advantages. So I'm talking about how are we going to break this corporate stranglehold? Look, I'm talking about structural change in the US government. I'm talking about term limits. 12 years for congresspeople and senators. It's not supposed to be a lifetime appointment to be in the Congress or the Senate. If you want to change what's going on in Washington, here's 3 things we can change with term limits. Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and Chuck Grassley. But look, no one in this race wants to talk about this because they're all in Washington, D.C. What I was talking about, that I did a referendum or a proposition where you put it on the ballot and people get to pass it. I want to do that on a national basis. And the example I always use is, look, over 90% of Americans want mandatory background checks on guns. More Republicans want it than Democrats. 70% of NRA members want mandatory background checks on guns. Really? We've never gotten it. And you wonder why. It's the NRA, right? It's not the NRA members. It's the gun manufacturers who control the NRA, and they won't let it happen. They own the Congress. So this is really what I'm talking about, is actually going after this stuff. And I want to say something else, which is this. Look, if I'm also a climate warrior, just so you guys know. I mean, I was saying that when it comes to climate, I want to partner with rural America because I know we're going to need farmers and rural communities to be partners. And the example I use is wind energy in the state of Iowa. You know, if you leave Iowa and ask people what you guys are famous for when it comes to climate, everybody will say 42% wind energy. It's completely off the charts for any place else in the United States. And going up. And let's just be clear, Warren Buffett didn't do it to be nice. He's not a bad man, but he's doing it to make money. So it was a combination of policy change, working with farmers to make sure that it worked for them, and then letting the market take over. That's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to make policy changes, working with the people who actually know what's going on the ground to make sure that it makes sense in a detailed fashion, and then making it happen. So I want to say one last thing, which is this. Look, if you listen to those debates, and when I listened to those debates, I felt like, wow, we're just going from crisis to disaster to crisis in this country. We must be a failed society. We are not a failed society. We have a failed government. We are an incredibly successful society. We're the most successful society ever. We have to take back our government to get the things that people in this country want, which is both Democrats and Republicans. Look, when we're talking about affordable health care for everyone as a right, Republicans want that too. Quality education from pre-K through college. You think everyone wants that as a right? Clean air and clean water. Nobody gets to poison your family to make money. Yeah. We have a right to clean air and clean water and a living wage. One of the things that has astounded me and has been really important for me in coming to Iowa through the years has been to be able to put a human face on statistics. Working people in the United States, meaning 80 to 90% of people, have not had a raise in 40 years, 2 generations. There has been a concerted, effective war on working people in this country by corporations. And the way you know it's worked is all of the increased money that this society has produced has gone to the biggest corporations and the richest people. None of it to working people for 40 years, which is an amazing fact when you think about the United States of America. 2 generations of no raise, that has never happened in American history. So I think working people in this country deserve a living wage. It's a right that one job should be sufficient. You know, people always talk about the low unemployment rate. We do have a very low unemployment rate, and by the way, Iowa has a really low unemployment rate. The problem we have is you can't live on the jobs. You don't have a job, you have 2 jobs. You know, that's what we're really seeing. We don't have, politicians love to talk about jobs. I think it's time we start talking about wages and benefits. The ability to actually live. Honestly, when I listen to people talk about what's going on in the country, it's as if they never went out into the country and talked to actual people. You know, I was here in Iowa last week talking to some people who work for the state in the mental health field. And mental health is an area where there's far too little capacity in Iowa for dealing with the problems and the people's needs. And so I was hearing a lot about that, but what I was also hearing is how badly the state treated the workers. How they tried to take all their money, prevent them from getting raises, prevent them from getting overtime, fired people who got hurt on the job. And what it reminded me was this. You hear these economic statistics, no raise for 40 years. You know, you hear about the cost of healthcare, how much drugs cost, and they're just statistics. But when you see people whose lives are being changed, where it's just cruelty, they're cutting their taxes and taking it out of people's earnings. and you see it on a very well-intentioned, hardworking, idealistic American. It's cruelty, and it got me so mad. To think that is their move. Look, the other thing I've done, I don't know if you guys know this, I started the Need to Impeach movement.
Yes.
There's a lot you can say about Need to Impeach. I will say this. My dad, he did prosecute these Nazis at Nuremberg. And the last Nazi came out of prison when I was 13 years old. And he got pretty good press, believe it or not. He was they called him in the press the good Nazi. So I said to my father, did you interview this guy? And he was like, Tom, I interviewed all the top Nazis. I interviewed this guy. He was in charge of the Nazi war machine. He's the guy who made sure that they built all the stuff and had all the material they needed to wage war. He said, so is he the good Nazi? And he goes, Tom, he had 12 million slaves working for him who he was working to death. And he told me he didn't know they were slaves. There's no such thing as a good Nazi. And he also said, if you see something like this, where you think there's something really wrong in your society, then you should fight it as early as you can, before it really gets its hooks into our society.
Yes.
And that's people said with impeachment, you're crazy, it'll never happen, there's nothing really going on. And I said, look, I'll tell you something. First of all, 8 million Americans signed that petition. The American people are demanding that you know right from wrong, so please get with it. And that's actually the story of the American people making Washington do the right thing. But the other thing I said at the very beginning was, if you think I'm wrong, then read the paper tomorrow. And if you don't believe tomorrow's paper, read the paper the next day, because this ain't getting better. What I'm telling you is true is going to get worse. He's never going to be normal. He's never going to be honest. He's never going to stop stealing. And you know what? He doesn't have normal in his repertoire. Sorry. But what I do want to say is this. We're in a great situation if we win. When we were talking about grassroots organizing, which was originally called Next Gen Climate, it's now called Next Gen America. Biggest youth voter mobilization Next Gen America did last year in America. We were in 38 congressional districts, 2 of them in Iowa, the 1st and the 3rd. Next Gen more than doubled youth turnout in both those districts. Abby Finkenauer, Cindy Axne. In the 38 districts we were in, which were all swing districts, almost all of them held by Republicans, we more than doubled youth turnout, and we won 33 out of 38 districts. So when we're talking about what is going to happen next year, what I believe is it's going to be 2018 on steroids. Highest turnout we're ever going to see in America. All the people who don't vote, the 50% of Americans who don't vote, they're all Democrats. We don't have to convince them of anything. We just have to convince them that the system can work. That someone isn't lying to them, that someone actually cares about their problems, their family, and will do something about it. And that if they show up, the system heals itself. That is what 2020 is going to be about. Do we tell the truth enough to convince that 50% of Americans? We don't have to convince them of one darn thing, other than that the system is not broken, that democracy still works, that government of, by, and for the people will happen if they show up. And that is what I think next year is when we get the biggest victory in the history of the United States, literally, because it's so important that we get it, and people will figure that out, and Americans are smart. So that's it. So I would love to take as many questions as we can. So
You hit all my buttons.
hang on 1 second, let me give you
Mike's on the way?
let me give you a mic. And tell us all who you are. Does everybody know everything? Because I don't know everybody.
My name is Leonard Millender. I represent Penn Township Precinct for the Democratic Party here in Jefferson County. You've hit all the buttons for me. You really have. Everything you said is just like bang, 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 bang. I agree. And we need to stop that dumbass in the White House from using the Constitution's whitest sphinx there. But my question to you is, how are you going specifically to do what you're saying to do to get rid of the corruption if we don't control both houses? And that's the trouble we're in now, because we could impeach him.
We're going
And
to impeach
we
him.
could overdo his veto if he does that. And we're going to impeach him. I mean, I'm crossing my fingers. He's got a lot.
I'll knock on wood.
He's got a lot of dumbasses backing him. But specifically, how are you going to, as president, change and get rid of the corruption?
So that is, Leonard, that's a very fair question. So I think I want to answer it with 4 different ways. First of all, I just want to talk about climate for 1 second. Because mostly what I'm going to do is try and break the corporate stranglehold. And that's across the board. Climate's the one exception. And the reason I accept it is there's just time. We can't wait. I'm going to declare a state of emergency on climate on the first day of my presidency. And I'm going to make it priority 1. I'm going to use emergency powers of the presidency. That's the first thing. Second of all, I am going to the communities. I said to you, I want to partner with rural communities and farmers. It's true. I'm also going to go to the communities where we have concentrated pollution in air and water and make sure we learn from them the policies we need to follow so that as we solve the climate crisis, we solve the air pollution and water pollution crisis. We're going to create millions of good paying jobs across this country. We're going to rebuild America, and we're going to use it to make sure people get decently paid. They're going to be well-paid union jobs. Millions of them. And the third thing is we're going to have to make sure it's #1 thing in terms of our foreign policy, because this is not an American problem that we've created within our borders. This is a world problem. The only country that can lead the world on this is us. We have to get back to being the moral leader of the world, the financial leader of the world, the technological leader of the world, the commercial leader of the world. This is what's taken us back. Because if we don't do it, there is no second choice. So that's the first thing I want to say, Leonard, is on that, I'm going to use emergency powers of the presidency. Let's talk about how we actually break the corporate stranglehold widespread. 3 things. 1, this election is about calling this out to me. You know, if you think about what national elections are about, they're about deciding what we have to do and who you trust to do it. If you think back to 2008, Barack Obama said, I'm going to fix the healthcare system. And when he got in, he tried to fix the healthcare system. If he hadn't said he was going to do it, he couldn't have done it. If he said he was going to do it, he had to try and do it. And everybody knew that's why he got elected. He had a mandate to do that. And that's the one thing he got through Congress. So the first thing is to call it out. This is the issue. And that's really why I'm running, because I don't want the issue to be the difference in policies that we can't get. Which plan for the Green New Deal that we can't pass is the best plan? It's like, really? Could we talk about reality for a second? So that's, first of all, call it out in there. Secondly, there are things the president can do without the Congress, without other votes, and one of them is the Federal Election Commission.
Yeah.
It's completely moribund, and both parties are very happy for it to be moribund. But the Federal Election Commission can demand transparency. It can get rid of the dark money in elections. It can make it clear who's doing it. And look, you guys are in Iowa. This is a big deal in Iowa. You know, the Kochs and ALEC are very big in this state. And Joni Ernst is a perfect example. There's dark money, it's anonymous money, and it just comes in and it's, the Committee to Save the Planet. So we can do that. There's certain levers the president can pull, and that's one of them. And you can insist on transparency, and you can set fines that actually matter on this. And I would do that immediately to try and make sure we had transparency. Transparency is the first step towards decency. But the third thing is, we're gonna have to change, people are gonna have to force their elected officials to act. And that's what I'm talking about, is this. Look, I'm a grassroots person. I believe in the people in this room, that you guys are the heroes of this country. That it's rooms like this of people who care, who want to do the right thing, and who insist their elected officials do the right thing. So ultimately, if the people of the United States rule as long as they want to. And if they don't want to, then the corporations get in there. So if we give up and say, okay, nothing need happen, and we'll then re-elect the same people again, we're gonna lose. But if the people of the United States say, do it or you're out, it's done. And so that's gonna be my actual answer to that, is we're gonna have to, the people of the United States are gonna have to say to their elected officials, you gotta do this. You've given away the government. We gotta take it back, and if you don't, we're gonna get someone in there who will. And that's really where we are. Is because, and if you think about it, look, I was an econ poli-sci major. And one of the things they teach you in econ poli-sci is they're generational elections. That they're elections where you change what the meaning of the country is. And one of them was 1932. FDR came in and said, this country's in a depression and the government's gonna work for the people. That we're gonna actually stand up, we're gonna start all these programs and entities to save you. We're gonna put in federal deposit insurance. We're gonna start the CCC, all these new ways of thinking that the government actually is supposed to help the people when they're in trouble. We're gonna have Social Security. All the new ways of thinking. And that was a generational change, different relationship. And the next generational change was Ronald Reagan. Because he came in and said, government's back. He said, scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And he said, unions are back. He said, markets are efficient and fair. He said, pollution, not a problem. Look, if you go down, he changed the way people think in the United States of America, in my mind, in a very destructive way. And people are still listening to him. So the answer is, we are in this room, across this country, are gonna have to decide to take back our government. And we're gonna have to decide it's really important, and that if we do it, we're gonna get everything. Because we are gonna get everything. And if we don't take back this government, we're gonna get exactly what we've been getting, nothing. So that's the choice. But it's not gonna be me. It's not gonna be the president. It's gonna be the people.